All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful ideas from James Clear's game-changing book, Atomic Habits. It's all about why you should stop trying to make these massive, earth-shattering changes and instead just focus on getting 1% better every single day. Let's dive in.
First up, let's talk about something we've all experienced, the all-or-nothing trap. You know the drill. You set a huge, ambitious goal, you're super excited, and then, poof, it all fizzles out. It's a really frustrating cycle.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You decide you're going to finally write that novel, or run a marathon, or become fluent in Spanish. The energy is electric for maybe 48 hours. Then reality sinks in, that motivation just disappears, and the goal suddenly feels miles away. We've all been there, right?
But here's the thing you really need to hear. If that sounds familiar, the problem isn't that you're lazy or that you lack willpower. It's not a personal failure at all. The problem is the strategy. That whole go big or go home approach is just, well, it's broken.
Okay, so if going big is the problem, what's the solution? Well, it's an idea called the 1% rule, and it is backed by some really simple but honestly pretty mind-blowing math.
So let's just ask the question. Forget about giant leaps forward for a second. What if you could just make a tiny, almost unnoticeable improvement, just 1% every single day for a year? What do you think that actually adds up to? The math is pretty straightforward. It's 1.01, that's your tiny 1% improvement, to the power of 365 days. I mean, it doesn't look like much, does it? It seems so insignificant. But the answer is absolutely staggering. You end up almost 38 times better than where you started. That's the magic of compounding, but instead of money in a bank account, it's happening in your own life. It's not a straight line of growth, it's exponential.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the flip side. Getting 1% better every day gives you that incredible 37 times improvement. But getting just 1% worse every day doesn't just make you a little worse off, it erodes you down to almost nothing. It's a stark reminder that your tiny daily habits, whether they're good or bad, are quietly steering you toward a destination.
And this just perfectly sums up James Clear's whole idea. We're always looking for that one big moment, that once-in-a-lifetime transformation. But success isn't about that at all. It's just the quiet, consistent product of what you do every day.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, this sounds cool in theory, but does it actually work in the real world? Well, let me tell you about one of the most amazing case studies you'll ever hear, the unbelievable transformation of British cycling.
So for basically 100 years, British cycling was, well, they were a joke. In a century of competing, they'd won a single gold medal. Then, in 2003, they hired a guy named Dave Brailsford. Just 5 years later, at the Beijing Olympics, his team didn't just win, they dominated, taking home an insane 60% of the gold medals. So, how on earth did they do it?
Brailsford's entire strategy was built on this one simple but powerful philosophy, the aggregation of marginal gains. The idea was to break down every single tiny thing that goes into riding a bike and then just improve each little element by just 1%. He believed that all those tiny gains would add up to something huge.
And when I say they looked everywhere, I mean everywhere. This wasn't just about the obvious stuff. No, they redesigned the bike seats to be more comfortable. They actually hired a surgeon to teach the athletes the proper way to wash their hands to cut down on colds. They even painted the inside of their equipment truck white just so they could spot tiny specks of dust that might mess with the bikes. It was a complete obsession with the smallest details. So we know the 1% rule works, but there's a catch, and it's the very reason that most of us give up too early. When you first start making these small changes, the progress feels completely invisible. James Clear has a name for this. He calls it the Valley of Disappointment.
This really frustrating period happens because you're on what he calls the Plateau of Latent Potential. Just think of it like this. All your hard work is building up, like energy being stored in a battery, but it hasn't hit that critical point yet where you can actually see the results.
You know, the best way to think about it is with an ice cube. Imagine you have an ice cube in a room and you're slowly raising the temperature. At 29 degrees, nothing happens. 30 degrees, still a block of ice. 31 degrees, still nothing. You're putting in all this effort, raising the temperature, but you see zero change. And then you hit 32 degrees and boom, a breakthrough. The ice finally starts to melt. So here's the key takeaway. That 1 degree change that melted the ice, it wasn't magic. The real work was done by all those degrees that came before it.
All that effort you're putting in during the valley of disappointment is never, ever wasted. It's just being stored up for that breakthrough moment.
Okay, so let's dig into the psychology here for a minute. Why is this 1% approach so much more powerful than setting these giant goals? Well, it's because it works with your brain's wiring, not against it.
When you set a huge all-or-nothing goal like, I'm going to the gym for 2 hours every single day, your brain kind of freaks out. It triggers fear and resistance, and you just feel overwhelmed. But a tiny 1% improvement like, I'm just going to put my running shoes on, that's psychologically safe. It's so small that your brain doesn't even bother to fight it.
And this tiny approach gives you 3 huge advantages. First, like we said, it just flies right under your brain's resistance radar. Second, it lets you build positive momentum, one tiny little win at a time. And third, and this might be the most important one, it builds what's called self-efficacy. That's just a fancy term for the real, genuine belief that you can actually do this. And that belief is what fuels all lasting change. Okay, so we've talked about the math, we've seen the proof, we get the psychology. Now let's get to the most important part, how you can actually put this into practice.
Just remember this final, really critical idea from the book. Whatever results you have in your life right now, your fitness, your career, your relationships, they aren't a reflection of what you did yesterday. They're a lagging measure of the habits you had weeks and months ago. So stop obsessing over the results and just focus on making the process, your daily habits, 1% better. The outcomes will take care of themselves.
So I'll leave you with this one simple question. Forget about the massive, life-changing goal for a second. What is one tiny, almost laughably small 1% improvement you can make tomorrow? Just think about it. Pick one thing and let that be the start of your own amazing compound curve.